I thought the lake house would be mine forever, my safe place, my escape. But one day, I drove up to find strangers living there. My parents had sold it, behind my back for her. They say home is where the heart is for me. That place had always been our lake house. It wasn't big or luxurious, not compared to my parents' suburban home, but it was perfect. Nestled in a quiet inlet in northern Michigan, with creaky floorboards, a crooked dock, and wind chimes that danced in the breeze. I spent every summer there as a kid, and later, when I moved out for college, it became my safe haven. The lake house was the only place that ever truly felt like mine. It was left to me in my grandfather's will. I was 19 when he passed. I still remember sitting beside him in the hospital, holding his frail hand. He looked at me with those cloudy eyes and whispered, "You're the only one who ever appreciated that place. Promise me you'll take care of it." I did, and when the will was read, I found out he meant it. He had left the lake house solely to me. My parents weren't thrilled. My mom smiled through gritted teeth. My dad said something like, "Well, your sister's still young, maybe when she's older, you can both use it." But I was the legal owner. That house was mine. And over the years, I put everything into maintaining it, refinishing the deck, fixing plumbing, planting wildflowers along the path to the water. I worked a job some summers just to pay the property tax. It was hard, but I never complained. I loved it too much. And then came her wedding. My sister, Erica. If you've ever had a golden child sibling, you already know how this goes. Erica was the shining star, the straightest student turned law school prodigy. My mom's mini-me, my dad's pride. The one who never got grounded, never had to mow the lawn, and never not once was told no. Me. I was the quiet one, the artist, the one who was too sensitive or not ambitious enough. The one they smiled at like I was a charity case. Still, I loved Erica. I really did. I even helped her with wedding planning. She got engaged to some smug finance bro named Derek. And suddenly our family went into full-blown wedding fever. Pinterest boards, champagne brunches, boutique fittings every weekend. It was exhausting and expensive. I overheard my mom stressing about the cost once, and I naively offered to help design her invites and centerpieces to save money. I didn't expect a thank you, and I didn't get one. But I wanted to help, because she was my sister. But something started to feel off. The closer we got to the wedding date, the more my parents avoided eye contact when I talked about the lake house. I had told them I planned to spend a month there after summer, the break I desperately need. After a chaotic art exhibition I was prepping in Chicago, I had even invited a few close friends. But every time I brought it up, my mom would say things like, "Oh, that place still standing? Or maybe you should look at other options just in case." One day, I drove up early without telling anyone to drop off some canvas rolls. I hadn't been there in over a month. It was a warm Friday afternoon. I was already daydreaming about sitting on the dock with my sketch pad and a cold cider. But when I turned onto the familiar gravel driveway, my stomach dropped. There was a moving truck in front of the house. At first, I thought maybe I was trespassing. My heart started racing as I got out of my car and walked toward the porch. A man in cargo shorts and a flannel shirt stepped out, surprised to see me. "Can I help you?" he asked. I blinked. "I own this house." He looked confused. "You? What?" I pulled out my ID. "My name is Olivia. Olivia Carson. This is my property." He pulled out his phone and showed me a listing on Zillow. This house was listed 3 weeks ago. We closed last week. I have the deed in my email if you want to see it. I didn't believe him. I thought it was some kind of prank, some mistake. I frantically called my parents. They didn't pick up. I called again. Nothing. It wasn't until 3 hours later, 3 agonizing hours of sitting in my car in total shock, that my mom finally called back. "Mom," I cried. "What the hell is going on?" She sounded annoyed. Not guilty. Not scared. Just annoyed. "Sweetie, calm down. We didn't want to stress you out before your show. We figured we'd explain after the wedding." I could hardly breathe. "You sold the lake house?" "That house was mine," she scoffed. "It's just a house. Olivia, you hardly go there anymore. And you know your sister deserves a beautiful wedding. You think these things are cheap?" I was stunned silent. She continued. "Look, the market was good. We got a great offer, way more than it was worth. And it's not like you paid for it. Your grandfather left it to you. But it was still family property for decades. We just shifted some things around. They had sold my sanctuary to fund Erica's $120,000 wedding. I didn't even know it had cost that much until that moment. I just assumed they were managing things or cutting corners. Instead, they had quietly sold. The house that meant more to me than anything Elsa never even told me. My dad chimed in later via text, "You'll understand someday." Family comes first. No apology. No remorse. Just an expectation that I'd take it on the chin. But I didn't. That night, I packed a bag and stayed at a friend's apartment. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the wall, trying to process the betrayal. They had stolen from me, and it was theft, legal or not. They forged documents, I later found out. My mother had power of attorney from years ago, when I was briefly in the hospital. And they had used it illegally too. Sign over the deed. My name had been wiped without my knowledge. I could have sued. Maybe I still can. But at that moment, I didn't care about courtrooms or compensation. I cared about the fact that my family, my own flesh and blood, saw me as so disposable that they could erase me for the sake of party favors and a designer dress. And the worst part, Erica knew. A week later, I confronted her. We were in the middle of the wedding rehearsal dinner. I hadn't planned on showing up, but I needed to see her face. I cornered her near the bathrooms and asked, "Did you know they sold the lake house to pay for this?" She didn't deny it. She just sighed and said, "Don't ruin this for me, Olivia. You've always been dramatic. It's just a house." I slapped her. I'd never hit anyone in my life before that moment, but I saw red. She clutched her cheek, gasped theatrically, and screamed for security. Our relatives rushed over. I walked out. No one followed me. And that was when I knew I had never really belonged in that family. They'd always seen me as second class, as decoration, as someone who should stay quiet and be grateful for crumbs. But I wasn't going to be silent anymore. They had taken the lake house, but they weren't going to take my dignity. The morning after I slapped my sister, I half expected anyone to reach out, a text, a voicemail, even an angry message from my mom demanding an apology. But my phone stayed silent. It was like I'd been deleted. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal of losing the lake house or the coldness that followed. Like I was never part of the family to begin with. The wedding was still 2 days away. I didn't want to go. Every fiber of my being wanted to burn the whole day down. But somewhere deep inside me was a craving, one last desperate hope, that maybe someone would apologize. Maybe they'd realize what they did was unforgivable. Maybe they'd even beg me to forgive them. I got neither. Instead, the wedding went forward like nothing had happened. I watched it unfold from a distance on social media. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years posting selfies in floral dresses and pastel ties, gushing over Erica and Derek's dreamy celebration. My mom beamed in every photo, her arms wrapped tightly around Erica, like they were royalty. No one mentioned me. I was the invisible sibling, the one who chose not to come, as if I wasn't robbed of something sacred. But I did show up, just not in the way they expected. I spent the night of the wedding writing a letter. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional or erratic. It was methodical, precise, thought out. I poured every ounce of truth I'd been silencing my entire life into that letter. It began like this: to the family who taught me that blood means nothing without respect. And then I told them everything. I laid it bare. How I'd always been treated like a backup dancer in my own family. How my achievements were overlooked, while Erica's were celebrated with cake and champagne. How I ate instant ramen while working 3 jobs, and Erica had her rent paid until she got her first corporate job. How they laughed when I said I wanted to be an artist. How they sold my inheritance for a party I wasn't invited to. And most importantly, how I was done being silent. I printed 5 copies. 1 for Mom, 1 for Dad, 1 for Erica, 1 for my Aunt Lynn, who always took my sister's side but claimed to love us equally, and 1 for me, to remind myself that I finally said what needed to be said. The next morning, I drove to the country club where the wedding had taken place. The staff were still cleaning up. I handed each letter to the front desk and told them to give them to the Carsons when they arrived for brunch. Then I left. No confrontation, no screaming match, just silence. For the first time in my life, I chose to walk away. But the fallout came fast. It started with my father. He called me at 2 a.m. that night, his voice shaking with rage. He left a 5-minute voicemail calling me ungrateful, vindictive, and jealous. Jealous, like I wanted to trade places with Erica. Like I'd ever choose to be the person who needed a $100,000 wedding to feel validated. Then came the text from Erica. "You're sick. You need therapy. This was the best day of my life and you tried to ruin it." I didn't respond. I let their words hang in the air because for once, I didn't need to defend myself. I'd already said my piece, but my mother's reaction, that one, gutted me. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply sent one message. "I don't know who you've become, You've broken this family. Not we hurt you. Not we're sorry. You've broken this family. I cried for hours after that, because no matter how strong I tried to be, a part of me still longed for her love, her approval, her warmth. But she'd made her choice, and now I had to make mine. I started looking into legal options. A friend of mine whose father was an estate attorney put me in touch with a lawyer. I explained what happened. The house was mine, left to me by my grandfather. But my mother had held power of attorney from when I was briefly hospitalized in college due to a car accident. That document I'd signed under duress, barely conscious, and trusting that it would only be used if I were incapacitated. Instead, she used it to sign over the deed, claiming I had verbally agreed to sell. The lawyer was stunned. Olivia, he said, this is forgery, and if you can prove it, we can sue for damages and possibly even press criminal charges. I didn't know how to feel. Yes, I wanted justice, but the idea of dragging my own parents into court, it made my stomach twist. Still, I had to at least consider it, because what they did wasn't just betrayal, it was theft, exploitation, and gaslighting all rolled into one. My lawyer suggested starting with a cease and desist letter to the real estate agency, requesting records of the sale, signatures, and communications. That would give us a clearer picture of the timeline, and whether or not the agents knowingly participated in fraud. While I waited for the documents, I stayed with a friend in the city. Every day, I tried to rebuild some sense of self. I painted. I walked by the lake. I went to therapy. I cried in strangers' bathrooms more times than I can count. But every day, I got a little stronger. And then the documents came in. A courier dropped them off at noon on a rainy Thursday. I sat at the kitchen table, heart pounding, and tore open the envelope. And there it was. A forged signature. Sloppy. Not even close to mine. And next to it, my mother's name neatly printed, along with a witness signature that belonged to Aunt Lynn. They had planned this, coordinated it, executed it behind my back like it was just another errand on their to-do list. That was the moment the last thread snapped. There was no fixing this, no mending, no apologies that would suffice. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had written me off as disposable. I forwarded the documents to my lawyer. He confirmed it. I had a solid case, not just for financial restitution, but for punitive damages, emotional distress, and forgery. It wouldn't be an easy fight, and it would cost money, but it was possible, and I knew what I had to do. I filed. 2 days later, a lawsuit was formally drafted and sent to my parents. The charges were clear: unlawful transfer of property, abuse of power of attorney, and forgery of legal documents. That's when the real storm hit. My dad showed up at my friend's apartment unannounced. I didn't let him in. He screamed at the door for 15 minutes, accusing me of tearing the family apart for a shack by a lake. I filmed the entire thing, just in case. Then Erica called from a blocked number. Her voice was eerily calm. You're going to regret this, she said. You think you've won something, but all you've done is show the world how pathetic you are. I hung up. And finally, my mom sent one last message. You were always difficult. This just proves we were right to give Erica the wedding she deserved. Not I'm sorry. Not let's talk. Just more manipulation. More cruelty. They had made their bed. Now they'd lie in it. And I was just getting started. Because the story wasn't over yet. There was still one final card I hadn't played. One last letter. Not written to them but to the new owners of my lake house. The lake house may have been stolen, but it wasn't forgotten. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the sun glinting off the water. I heard the wind chimes on the porch. I felt my grandfather's presence, the only one who ever truly saw me. And I couldn't let that be the end. Not without a fight. I knew the couple who had bought the house weren't to blame. They'd purchased it in good faith, but they held something that had been taken from me. So I wrote them a letter. It wasn't angry. It wasn't legalistic. It was human. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Halperin, I know this may come as a shock, but the house you now live in once belonged to me. Not just legally, emotionally, spiritually, personally. It was left to me by my grandfather, who built every corner of it with his own hands. My parents sold it without my consent, forging documents to do so. I don't blame you. You were caught in the middle. But I wanted you to know the truth. And I wanted to ask one thing, not for the house, but for access, to visit once, to say goodbye properly, to leave a letter under the floorboard where my grandfather and I used to hide trinkets. Please, if you have any empathy for a stranger who lost a part of her soul, consider it. I mailed it, not expecting anything in return. But 2 weeks later, I got a handwritten response. Olivia, we're so sorry. We had no idea. What your parents did is unimaginable. This isn't just a property, it's a legacy. And if it's okay with you, we'd like to help make it right. We're willing to testify. We'll send over the paperwork, the agency mails, the forged docs we received. And if you ever want to visit, we'll leave the door open. We'll be away the next 2 weekends. If you want to come by and spend one last night here, the place is yours. With compassion, Julia and Mark Halperin. I broke down in tears. For the first time in months, someone strangers chose kindness over convenience, compassion over conflict. They didn't owe me a thing, but they gave me peace. The next weekend, I drove up alone. It was raining, the kind of soft, misty rain that makes the trees glisten and the lake ripple like silk. I pulled into the driveway. Just before sunset, everything looked the same and completely different at once. The wildflowers I planted were still growing. The dock was still slightly tilted. My grandfather's wind chimes still sang. I stepped inside and sat in the living room. The walls smelled like cedar and childhood. I found the loose floorboard behind the fireplace and placed my letter. They're folded gently inside a plastic bag to protect it from time. Then I curled up on the couch with a blanket and cried myself to sleep. That night wasn't closure, but it was a turning point. Because when I woke up, I felt ready to see the courtroom, ready to face them. And a month later, I did. The trial was brutal. My parents fought it at every turn. Their lawyers argued that they had acted in the family's best interest, that the house was community property, that I had verbally relinquished my ownership due to emotional instability. They tried to paint me as erratic, vindictive, mentally unwell, but I had facts. I had documents. I had the Halperin's testimony, and I had the truth. My lawyer was fierce. He outlined everything: the forged power of attorney, the fraudulent sale, the blatant breach of trust. We even had a handwriting expert testify that the signature on the deed wasn't mine. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood on the witness stand and looked directly at the jury. My family didn't just sell a house, I said. They erased a legacy. My grandfather built that home with love. He gave it to me because I cherished it. And they stole it for party favors and flower walls. They told me I was selfish, dramatic, disposable. But I'm not here to punish them. I'm here because what they did was wrong. And if I don't stand up for myself now, it'll happen again. To someone else. To anyone who's ever been treated like the second choice. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the judge looked shaken. The verdict came in 3 days later. Guilty. My parents were found liable for financial damages, emotional distress, and forgery. The sale of the house couldn't be reversed. It was too late for that. But they were ordered to pay me over $300,000 in restitution, money that would not come from Erica. That would come directly from them. It wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming my power. About forcing them to see on public record that I wasn't the broken one. They were. After the ruling, I didn't see them again for months. Then, one day, I got a letter in the mail. It was from my mom. She wrote, "I still don't agree with what you did, but maybe we weren't as fair as we thought. Maybe we took more than we gave. I hope one day you can forgive us. Love, Mom." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not because I forgave her, but because I didn't need her forgiveness anymore. Either. Today, I live in a small but bright studio near Lake Michigan. I paint every day. I sell my work. I teach workshops to kids who've been silenced or shamed by people they trusted. The Halperins and I still keep in touch. Every Christmas, they send a photo of the lake house covered in snow. They even named their daughter Olivia. Not after me. They say they just like the name. But I know better. I still miss the house sometimes. But more than anything, I'm grateful. Because losing it taught me to fight for myself. To speak up. To say enough. To realize that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't rage, it's reinvention. And I've never felt more free.